Though people often confuse the two, there is a difference between Disneyland and Disney World. The Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World was based off of Disneyland, and they share a lot in common, but it's always been its own theme park with unique characters, rides, and locations. If you're in Florida on a hot summer day and are looking for something sweet, stop by the Sunshine Tree Terrace for some ice cream. It's a place you won't find at Disneyland in California, and if you look at the sign, you'll see the Orange Bird, a character who you also won't find on the West Coast. But the Orange Bird wasn't always there. In fact, there was a time when the character disappeared. And given the reason why he went away, it didn't seem like he would ever come back. Because, you see, while queer people were fighting for their rights in the US, the Orange Bird went from selling orange juice to being a symbol for something more sinister.
Little orange bird, in the sunshine tree, won't you think of something sunny just for me? Think of funny thoughts, or a sunny word, that will make me happy, little orange bird.
To talk about what exactly happened to the Orange Bird, we have to go back to the 40s. It was around this time that Donald Duck began appearing on cans of orange juice, beginning a partnership between Disney and Florida's natural growers. In the late 60s, Disney was breaking ground on the Magic Kingdom Park, and the Florida Citrus Commission, the new name of Florida's natural growers, sponsored parts of the Adventureland section of the park, specifically the Tiki Room area and the first location of the Sunshine Tree Terrace. In return, Disney legend Bob Moore designed the Orange Bird, a character with an orange for a head that would help promote Florida oranges. Though the Orange Bird can't speak, he communicates with thoughts, and it turns out that lent itself very well to the costume character design that usually doesn't speak anyway. So by the time the Magic Kingdom opened in 1971, the Orange Bird was appearing at Disney World, and he was also the first Disney World exclusive character. However, the Orange Bird was also used outside of the parks. The Florida Citrus Commission used him in advertisements, and he could even be spotted at orange stands throughout the Orlando area. In this way, the sponsorship was mutually beneficial. Not only did the Florida Citrus Commission get an elusive partnership with Disney, but when families would leave the resort, they'd be reminded of Disney thanks to the adorable, unique character. But here's where it gets complicated. Like many Disney characters, the Orange Bird had a theme song.
Little orange bird, in the sunshine tree, won't you think of something sunny just for me?
The Orange Bird song is one of my favorite Disney songs. It was written by the Sherman brothers and is a wonderful upbeat number that really matches the vibrant colors and happy personality of the Orange Bird. And if you remember my video about the strike that changed Disney music, you might appreciate knowing that this was also produced by Tutti Camarata, the person behind the sound of a lot of mid-20th century Disney music. There were multiple songs and an entire narrated story about the Orange Bird. In general, he was portrayed as an eccentric bird who wasn't accepted by the others due to not being able to speak. So the overall message was that the Orange Bird was wonderful and unique, even if some birds didn't accept him. But let's go back to that album cover, because the woman singing is Anita Bryant. In the late 60s, early 70s, Anita Bryant was a model and singer who had a successful career with songs like In My Little Corner of the World. However, for many people, the late 70s would bring about a new Anita Bryant, splitting her career into two sections, her artistry and her homophobia. Actually, homophobia doesn't even really begin to cover it. Anita Bryant is one of the most notorious anti-gay rights activists in US history, and she was one of the pioneers of a lot of the modern reactionary queerphobic arguments against LGBTQ rights. Her anti-gay rights activism had a mainstream breakthrough in 1977 when she headed the coalition Save Our Children to fight against an ordinance being introduced in Dade County, Florida, that made discrimination based on sexuality illegal. As you might guess from the group name, a lot of their queerphobic rhetoric was about saving children and subsequently society, arguing that queerness is unnatural and an offense to God. From their arguments, you'd think the whole fabric of society would crumble if two women held hands. Like I've talked about before, these arguments aren't necessarily new. Ever since queerness has been a thing, so have societal prejudices about it being unnatural and a threat to society. But to write off Anita Bryant's anti-gay activism as not being original would also be missing the point. When she began her crusade, she was a former Miss America winner, a successful pop singer, and a supposedly moral white Christian woman who worked with Disney. In other words, she was what mainstream society thought of when thinking of a quote-unquote respectable, noble woman. Obviously, that perspective came from the prejudices of US culture of the time. But when looking at modern queerphobia, I can't help but think about Anita Bryant. For many people, she was their first introduction to an anti-gay role model, a woman who embodied everything it meant to succeed in a white, cisgender, heteronormative society. And normally she wouldn't be so angry, but supposedly it wasn't her fault. From her perspective, it was queer people who were making her feel that way by being so threatening. If gays are granted rights, next we'll have to give rights to prostitutes, and to people who sleep with St. Bernards, and to nail-biters. This on-off switch of being a quote-unquote respectable person, aside from vitriolic rhetoric, has become so successful in US culture because it paints anybody questioning the status quo as actively attacking it. So people like Anita Bryant get to appear level-headed while also being provocative. The Save Our Children backlash to that anti-discrimination ordinance ended up being successful. However, it would spark an important turning point in the US LGBTQ rights movement, the orange juice boycott. And this was a huge problem for the Orange Bird. Up until that point, he was pretty tied to Anita Bryant, and since it was clear that her anti-gay activism wasn't going away, for many, the Orange Bird was tainted by association. The orange juice boycott quickly became a national phenomenon. LGBTQ people were very vocal about boycotting Florida orange juice, and gay bars even stopped serving screwdrivers, instead popularizing the Anita Bryant cocktail, which was just apple juice and vodka. Possibly the most notable event from the orange juice boycott happened in October of 1977. While giving a press conference, an activist shoved a pie in Anita Bryant's face, bringing more national attention on both sides. On one hand, LGBTQ people felt really empowered to make their voices heard. On the other hand, this gave room for Anita Bryant to continue playing the victim. To quote a friend of mine, like many things in the US, people were watching the same characters, but different TV shows. Some people grew up with the story that Anita Bryant was demonizing queer people, but others, like myself, grew up with the myth that queer people were the ones instigating and targeting Anita. It's hard now to picture just how much of a national issue this was at the time. LGBTQ activists were puncturing orange juice boxes at supermarkets, it was parodied on TV shows, and Anita Bryant was a household name.
So let's all squeeze the fruit for Anita, pass a little juice around, have a hit of sunshine if you need to, open your mind so she can close it right now.
You also have to keep in mind that this was not even 10 years after the Stonewall riots. The modern queer rights movement had just begun, and the orange juice boycott was an important cultural moment. It was one of the first times where mainstream US Americans couldn't ignore queer people. Anita Bryant's partnership with the Florida Citrus Commission ended abruptly in 1980, and as a result, so did Disney's association with her. The Orange Bird was used in some educational cartoons and comics, but he was slowly phased out. There were financial issues with how much the FCC was actually profiting off of their sponsorship, and though the Orange Bird still existed without Anita Bryant, the character's image couldn't really be truly separated from her. I think it's comical that Anita Bryant's gay crusade coincided with a character whose backstory is literally about finding acceptance in an unaccepting society. So anyway, in 1987, Disney ended their collaboration with the FCC, and the Orange Bird officially disappeared. And this was where it ended for many years. While growing up, I was familiar with the character who was tied to early Disney World history, and I mean, the song is really great. Like I said, it's one of my favorite Disney songs of all time. The arrangement is gorgeous, and the brass combined with the strings makes the song sound like it's floating above clouds. But the Orange Bird did return in 2004. Tokyo Disneyland brought back the Orange Bird as part of an Orange Day celebration, basically a Japanese holiday where couples give each other gifts that are orange themed. And he was hugely popular. I mean, why wouldn't he be? The Orange Bird is one of the most unique and charming theme park characters, so that makes sense. After the Orange Bird became a staple at Tokyo Disneyland, he was eyed for being brought back to the US parks and eventually made a return in 2012. And since then, the Orange Bird has continued being a beloved character, even among queer people. As for Anita Bryant, she hasn't really changed. When her granddaughter recently came out to her as a lesbian, she allegedly said that homosexuality is a delusion invented by the devil, and that her granddaughter should focus on loving God because that would make her realize she's straight. The anti-queer politics that Anita Bryant introduced still have an effect on US culture today. It's hard for me to think about QAnon's Save the Children campaign without drawing a parallel to Save Our Children. And when I see arguments about trans people invading family-friendly media, I think about how Anita Bryant enabled people to simultaneously target queer communities while also portraying themselves as victims. But the Orange Bird didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm glad that the character had another chance to exist separately from Anita Bryant, but I do still see this as a sad story. It's a story about queer rights, but on a personal level, it's also a story about one of my favorite Disney songs being lost to hate. Maybe one day it'll be re-recorded and re-released with a new singer, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But that doesn't mean that we have to forget it. In fact, we can make it ours again. So if you find yourself in the Magic Kingdom on a hot summer day, go to the Sunshine Tree Terrace to enjoy an ice cream and think of a funny thought, or a sunny word. Think a funny thought, or a sunny word, that'll make me happy, little orange bird. He thinks beautiful orange pictures, beautiful orange words, though his little beak can't even peep a squeak. All the thoughts he ever spoke appear in orange smoke. That's what makes the orange bird unique. Little orange bird in the sunshine tree, won't you think of something sunny just for me? Think a funny thought, or a sunny word, that'll make me happy, little orange bird.